Hi, and welcome to lesson 5.2. So for this lesson, it would be ideal if you could have with you both a compass, and so the compass looks like this thing here I'm circling. It's got a pointy end, and then the other end has pencil typically, so you can draw circles and arcs with it. And the other thing it'd be nice to have is a protractor. So if you have those, go and grab them now. If you don't, you can still just follow along. So the first thing we're going to learn how to do is how to bisect an angle. What does bisect? Bisect means to divide into two equal parts. So we're going to take a given angle and we're going to divide it into two equal parts. And there's two methods we're going to use for this. The first one is the classical geometry construction. So by classical, I mean like really old, like a couple thousand years old. So before they actually had other ways, like a protractor, to measure angles. Think of it as sort of like a game. The other one is we're going to be using the protractor. So let's do the first method first, the classical geometry construction. I think of it as like a puzzle or a game. A game is where you're constricted by what you can do by rules. So the rules in this game is that you're only allowed to use a straight edge, or you can use a ruler, but we're not going to be using the marks on the ruler. And the other thing we're going to be using is that compass, the thing that has a pointy end and that can make arcs and circles. So before you do this, you might want to just practice a little bit taking a compass, and it takes a little bit of skill to draw an arc really well, to do the compass, and to be careful not to squeeze it so that it stays the same length all the time, so that your circle looks really nice. So it might be a good idea to do that a little bit. But let's try our example. Our example says bisect an angle using a straight edge and a compass. So here's our given angle. What would we call this angle? Well, if I were to name it, I'd use the angle symbol, and then I can say ABC. I could also say angle CAB. You can go either way. But here's what you want to do. I'll describe it, but really be better if you can also, if we're not doing this in class, you can check out this video, because he does a much better idea of doing it. So you can either listen to me talk for a couple minutes, or you can just check out that video. So you want to put the pointy end of your compass right here, and then set it to make a little bit of an arc. So I'm going to make an arc there with the other end of the compass, and over here. So what we've made is that these two sections are now the same length. So those arcs are the same distance apart. And now you're going to go and put the pointy end here, and then make another arc that's somewhere down the middle. So enough of an arc so that you kind of want to approximate where the bisector is going to be. Then put a pointy end there, and then make the arc here. Where those two intersect, that's going to be part of the line that you're going to draw. Now you get out your straight edge. I'm just doing this by hand, so I'm sure it's not going to turn out as well. So you do it by hand, and there's your bisector. So at the end of this, I'll switch to red here. If I talk about this angle and I talk about this angle, those two angles are going to be the same. So I'll put the equality marks there. So now we have bisected the angle. All right, so there's one way to do it. The other way to do it is just to use your protractor. So you can measure this angle with your protractor, and then you divide that angle in half. So if you do have a protractor right now, what I'd like you to do is see if you can measure this angle here. Now, the angle that we're talking about is between there and there. So, thinking about your protractor, it's got that pointy part right there. You want to put this pointy part, or that part right there, so that this lines up with this line, and then you're going to measure which number it is. Protractors are going to have two sets of numbers right here, and since this is an acute angle, it's going to be the smaller one of the numbers. So see if you can do that right now, and write down what angle you get. When I do this, I got 36 degrees. So your answer should be within a couple, plus or minus 2, so anywhere between 34 and 38 would be okay. So measure your angle with the protractor. I'm going to put my answer right over here, 36 degrees. Divide that angle in half, so you can either do that in your head or you can use your calculator. 36 divided by 2 is 18 degrees. Now use your protractor to draw the bisector. So then what you're going to do is you're going to put your protractor over top of there, and again line it up really well, and then see if you can find the right place so that you're going to get 18 degrees. So I'm going to draw that out and say 18 degrees over here. So again, I can't really do a protractor on the screen, but that's how it would look. All right. Here's just example number 3 is about practicing using your protractor. Using a protractor, determine which lines are perpendicular. Perpendicular means that when they intersect, they make right angles. So you're going to measure. So measure all the intersections. Like measure here, 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 and see which ones are 90 degrees. And I think you can probably eyeball it yourself, but you should be able to see. And I think the answer is that this one here is the 90 degrees, and everything else isn't quite 90 degrees. Perpendicular, I should fill in this blank. Perpendicular means crossing at 90 degree angles. Okay. Oh, the lines that are perpendicular are, I guess it would be L1 and L3. Oh, and is there another set that are perpendicular? Oh, I'm thinking maybe L4 and L5 as well. So you can measure that. Okay, one last example before we go into the worksheet. Example 4 says angles that together make a straight angle must add up to 180 degrees. So here we have two angles. One of them is X and one of them is 81 degrees. So how would we be able to solve for that X? Well, there's a couple ways to think of this. One is I could kind of use an algebra style. I could say X and 81 degrees, they must add up to 180 degrees. So they are equal to 180 degrees. Now I think, hey, what I want to get X by itself. What am I going to do to both sides to undo plus 81? How do I undo adding 81? And the answer is I'm going to undo it by subtracting 81 from both sides. So if I subtract 81 on this side, minus 81 here, and minus 81 here, if I do it to both sides, because then it's still equal, X is going to be equal to 180 minus 81. And I think the answer then would be 99 degrees. Okay, so that's the way that I go to, because I love using algebra. You might just say, hey, if they have to add up to 180 degrees, I'm going to subtract 80. You can just go straight to this. Okay, so if two of them have to add up to 180, then X is going to have to be 81 less than 180, and you could subtract it. So either way, you're going to get your answer of 99 degrees. Okay, so now it's time for the worksheet, and it's a practice of bisecting the angle. Use the protractor to measure the original angle. Use the protractor to measure the bisector of each angle. So hopefully, you've done a good job in using your protractor. You're confirming that, and there's a few answers few questions to answer. Let's talk about number 6 because it looks a little bit daunting, but I think you guys can do it. It says a carpenter is placing different types of wood on a tabletop. Find the size of angles A, B, C, and D. Okay, so looking at angle A, so angle A right over here. So here's the thing, for angle A, that is a straight line. In other words, that has to add up to 180 degrees. So you've got a 60 degrees and you've got a 75 degrees. So I'm thinking something like that angle A plus 60 plus 75 equals 180. Maybe see if you can find out what number here for A makes that work. See if you can figure out what A is going to be. And I think B is very, very similar. Yeah, and I would say it's a bit of a challenge. If you can do C and D, it's possible to do, and the principle behind it to figure out those one is that inside a triangle, here's a way of writing triangle, in a triangle, the angles add up to 180 degrees. So I'm looking at, for example, looking at D. I'll erase what I had. Looking at D, I've got a 75 here, and I've got a 75 here, and I've got D over there. So D plus 75 plus 75 equals 180. So that's another way you can figure out what D is. So those are the two ideas behind it. Okay, so that's question number 6. 7 says it's a little bit challenging. Calculate the size of angles X and Y. All right, so I think first of all we could say that these two make 180 degrees, so you can figure out what Y is. So 70 plus what is equal to 180. Then when you've done that, these two add up to 180 degrees. So you can figure that out as well. So that's kind of cool. Here, these marks mean that those angles are equal. In other words, that angle of 144 degrees has been bisected, has been divided into two equal parts. Okay, see if you can get those, and you can check your answers using that that code over there. All right, great. Talk to you later.